So when I wrote metadimensional, I was concerned with the fact that this theory is unfalsifiable. It's unfalsifiable because not just because it's a theory in metaphysics. Physicalism is also a theory in metaphysics, and therefore metaphysics you won't find empirical proof for metaphysics. But the theory argues specifically that all the evidence that we perceive that we can collect in the wakeful physical world is just a concoction. It doesn't exist, and therefore, it doesn't have the authority to question the model that the theory argues for reality. And I was concerned about that. But having thought about it now, I realized that it is false. I guess you can discredit it, debunk it, you can show it that it's wrong, but you wouldn't do it with empirical evidence. If you want to show that the theory is wrong, you need to attack its axioms. And what are the axioms? So the axiom number one is that experience is fundamental. And axiom number two is that is the rejection of solipsism. Now, so far, there have been attacks on the axioms, but just on axiom number one, that experience is fundamental. But all the attacks were were arguing basically that experience isn't fundamental because experience is just, I would say, a figure of speech. Well, consciousness is fundamental. Experience is just a way of thinking about consciousness, but experience doesn't exist in isolation from all the other properties of consciousness, which include memory. I made videos arguing why I don't believe that's true. I think that it's quite easy to show how there is nothing that it's like to store memories without perceiving them. It's not something that you can experience, and therefore it shows that the distinction between them. And I also showed how thinking about reality as plurality of elements that are independent from each other and not just one element will get you to understanding that experience can exist independent of thought and memory, or of complex thought, memory, and some types of awareness. Anyway, so I made videos about that. So I don't think that those attacks were effective. But there's another way to attack the theory, and that goes the other direction. Instead of saying that consciousness is fundamental and experience doesn't exist, you can say that experience isn't fundamental because experience is not simple enough. There are simpler elements than experience that produce experience. The same way I'm arguing that experience produces like all the things that constitute consciousness can get them from experience and other elements that exist in the objective substrate. Then maybe you can go a step deeper and say there are elements that produce experience, and they are simpler than experience, and they are simpler than consciousness. You just go deeper into the lower into the abstraction, and show their existence. Now, I don't think that's true. I don't see how that can work. But I do see a place in the theory where you can say, hey, you have something here which needs explanation, and could suggest that it is true. And this is the argument that experience is change between configurations. Now, you could argue then how can it be that experience has configuration that doesn't have internal structure? So I argue that that's possible because the structure is not really, it's a relation between fundamental dimension. One of them is experience, one fundamental dimension, the dimension of experience, and all the other fundamental dimensions that produce the objective, that are all constitute the objective substrate that experience reflects on. So there's an metaphysical inconsistency. The whole idea that there's a reflection on of experience on them is a metaphysical inconsistency, and the fact that, and insofar as you assume that there's you reject solipsism and you accept that there are things other than yourself, then that metaphysical inconsistency must exist, and therefore, because it's a metaphysical inconsistency, then there's no problem to argue that the experience has configurations of it, because it's a metaphysical inconsistency. It doesn't require the kind of structure that consistent structures or consistent relations require. Now, that may sound weird to you, but I think that it isn't. We're just not used to the idea that metaphysical inconsistency exists. Even though, if you take Gödel's incompleteness theorems and apply it to metaphysics, you realize that if you have a full explanation for everything in reality, then according to Gödel's incompleteness theorems, you're going to have statements that are true, which you haven't proven. And since you have the full explanation of everything in reality, then what that means is that these things exist without a justification, and therefore they are a metaphysical inconsistency. So any theory will have metaphysical inconsistency. I just found a place where to put it, which I think works. But you can say no. There are simpler elements, and the metaphysical inconsistency, yes, it exists, but it exists at a lower level. That could be one argument to contradict the theory. I don't think that it holds, but maybe. Another argument you can say is that by arguing that we are all the manifestation of one dimension of experience, the fact that we share semantic context because of that, all that means that this is still solipsism. I don't think that's true either, because the problem with solipsism is that you assume that only you exist, and then you can't explain how all your interactions with other people that require you to assume that they exist. And in this explanation, you have no problem explaining why you need to interact with them as if they exist, because they exist, and because they aren't you, they perceive a different reality than you. Everything checks out, I think. But then you can say, no, there's a different problem with solipsism that this explanation doesn't solve, and therefore this solution doesn't hold. I don't think there is such an argument, but maybe you can find it, and then on that basis argue that the whole theory doesn't make sense. Now, so again, I don't think these arguments hold, but this is the way you can attack the theory effectively. Now, why am I even mentioning this? It's not because I want to show that the theory is wrong. I don't believe these arguments are wrong, but I do think that, and I did say in the book that I called the last chapter episode 1 because I know that this theory needs to progress, needs to evolve further. It can't be where it ends, and it's quite likely that more thinkers will continue from where I stopped and develop these ideas further. And by making arguments similar to those I suggested here, maybe a bit refined, maybe more effective. I don't see that as a failure of mine to make mistakes, like to make arguments that will be counted in the future. I see it as I see it as strange if that won't happen, especially if this theory has value, because this can't possibly be the gospel. The last word has to be more, and there are also applications of this theory that I haven't yet fleshed out, and there definitely needs to be further work on them. And who knows what will be discovered once they are put into practice. So I think I'm by making this video, I'm saying it's okay for you to think beyond the theory, just as long as you seriously consider what I'm arguing.